So you finally decided to show up? Grandma's voice was ice cold, nothing like the warm, loving tone I remembered from my childhood. I stood frozen on her doorstep, my heart pounding in my chest. Grandma, what's going on? I asked, my words rushing out as I tried to make sense of everything. They told me you were in a nursing home. Don't, she said, raising her hand. That small gesture felt like a slap. Your grandfather called you so many times on his deathbed. He kept asking for you, his little engineer, but you never answered. You never visited. How could you be so heartless, Ella? Let me see the number he was calling, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Please, Grandma, I need to understand. She disappeared inside for a moment and came back with a small notepad, her hands trembling. The number on it was in Grandpa's handwriting. This isn't my number, I whispered, staring at the unfamiliar digits. I've had the same number since high school. They gave you a fake one? What do you mean a fake number? She asked, her stern face softening. Your parents told us you changed it when you went to university, she said quietly. They said you wanted to stay away from us. Everything started to make sense. Grandma, I came here during break. Lucas was here. He wouldn't let me in. He said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home. Grandma's face turned pale. A nursing home? We never... Her voice trailed off, her hands shaking. Lucas and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life. They said... Her voice cracked. They said you were ashamed of us, that we weren't good enough for you anymore. What? My legs felt weak. I grabbed the porch railing for support. Grandma, they told me the funeral was at 1 p.m. today, I choked out, the words catching in my throat. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I had mixed up the time, but I knew I hadn't. I would never... The funeral was at 9 a.m., Grandma said slowly, realization hitting her. Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you didn't even bother to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Lucas was crying, saying he tried so hard to reach you. Tears filled my eyes, and before I knew it, I had fallen into Grandma's arms. We both broke down on the front porch, sobbing as all the pain and confusion poured out. He died thinking I abandoned him, I cried into her shoulder. Grandpa died thinking I didn't care. Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. We know the truth now. We know, she whispered. After we wiped our tears, Grandma picked up the phone. Her fingers shook slightly as she dialed, but her voice was strong. Betty? Yes, it's me. I need you, Jacob, and Lucas to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. She paused. No, it can't wait. When she hung up, she looked at me with determination. They'll be here in an hour. The lawyer is on his way too. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay in the kitchen until I call you, she said. I listened from the other room as they entered. I heard Mom's polite, practiced laugh, Dad's formal voice, and Lucas's bored sigh. Then Grandma spoke, her voice sharp and firm. Please, everyone, take a seat. Mr. Patrick is here to read David's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer opened his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable. Mom's perfect smile froze. Dad turned pale. Lucas's jaw dropped in shock. Mr. Patrick cleared his throat and began reading. I, David Smith, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room went silent except for the rustling of papers. First, the house was left to Grandma, along with enough money to take care of her. Then came the part that made Lucas's face turn red with anger. To my granddaughter, Ella Smith, I leave my newly built laboratory at 1680 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Grandpa had built me a lab, my very own research facility. The rest of my estate, Mr. Patrick continued, will be divided equally between my grandchildren, Ella and Lucas Smith. Lucas suddenly pushed his chair back and stood up, his face red with anger. But before he could say anything, Grandma raised her hand. "There's more," she said, pulling out a letter. "Your grandfather wanted this to be read too." I took a deep breath as she unfolded the letter. Memories of Grandpa filled my mind. "Where should we put this one?" Grandpa would ask every time I brought home a new trophy or a diploma. "In the box with the others," I'd reply, pulling out the special cardboard box I kept under my bed. I never displayed my awards, not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't want to seem like I was showing off. Mostly, though, I knew my success made my parents uncomfortable. Lucas, of course, had his own opinion. "Nobody likes a know-it-all," he would sneer. But that didn't stop him from asking me for help with his science homework. Or better yet, just having me do it for him. "Lucas, that's cheating," I told him once as I watched him copy my answers. "Ella, help your brother right now," Mom ordered in a tone that left no room for argument. "Family helps family." And just like that, I'd end up doing Lucas's homework, feeling guilty but too scared to stand up to my parents. It became a pattern. Lucas would demand, my parents would insist, and I would give in. I hated it, but what could I do? Sometimes I overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their hushed voices would drift upstairs while I sat in my room working on my chemistry set or reading the latest research paper. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say, sounding frustrated. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke. But underneath his laugh, I could hear the truth. He didn't understand me. One evening after I won yet another science competition, I heard Dad talking to Lucas about his grades, which had been slipping. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Lucas whined. "Listen, son," Dad said gently. "We need to focus on you. Ella, well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, my hands clenched into fists. I fought back tears. They thought ignoring me was okay because I was smart enough to take care of myself, as if being capable meant I didn't need love or support. I was the weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the science lab instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people came to me when they needed help with their homework, but real friends? Those were rare. The only people who truly understood me were Grandma and Grandpa. They were my support, my safe place. They would listen for hours as I excitedly talked about my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. "Look what I've found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out a stack of science magazines or a new tool for my experiments. "I thought you might like this." Even with their love, I still felt an empty space inside where my parents' approval should have been. At school events, I would watch other families, parents hugging their kids, siblings cheering each other on, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that changed everything. I was graduating early. At just 17, I had completed all my high school requirements and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like taking my first real breath of fresh air. The campus was full of energy, and for the first time, I wasn't the odd one out. In my advanced engineering class, I met Natalie and Owen, two people who were just as excited about structural design as I was. For the first time in my life, I had friends who truly understood me. We spent hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, laughing at failed experiments, and celebrating our discoveries, things that would make most people's eyes glaze over. It was everything I had ever wanted. But even as I thrived in my new world, a part of me still longed for my family's approval. I called home every week, hoping for more than the short, uninterested conversations I usually got. "Yes, Ella, that's nice," Mom would say when I told her about my research. Then, without fail, she would change the subject. "Oh, did you hear about Lucas's new job? He's working at that fancy tech startup downtown." It felt like my achievements didn't matter, like I wasn't even worth celebrating. I didn't know it then, but my time at university was just the calm before the storm. One day, during one of my usual calls home, something felt off. I was in the middle of my second semester, deep in my research, when I heard Mom's voice in the background. And with your father's condition getting worse, she said, probably talking to Dad, thinking I was on mute. My heart started racing. Mom, what about Grandpa? What's wrong with him? There was a long pause, too long to be innocent. Oh, Ella, she said, her voice suddenly changing. I didn't realize you were still on the line. It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering. I didn't believe her. I'm coming home, I said right away, already thinking of the fastest way to get there. I can be there by tomorrow morning. No, don't be ridiculous, Mom said sharply. You need to focus on your studies. Lucas is helping them. Everything's under control. Something in her voice didn't feel right, but I told myself I was overthinking. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling, so I called Grandma right after. Oh yes, dear, Grandma said, but her voice sounded strange, distant. Lucas has been such a help. He comes by often to check on your grandfather. Lucas? The same brother who always said visiting our grandparents was boring? Something didn't make sense. 3 weeks later, I stood in front of my grandparents' house, my heart pounding. Instead of Grandma's warm greeting, I found Lucas blocking the doorway. What are you doing here? He asked, pretending to be surprised. I came to see Grandpa and Grandma. How is he? No one's home, he said quickly. Too quickly. Grandpa's sick. Where would they go? I don't know, Ella. Just go away, he snapped, trying to close the door. Wait, I said, sticking my foot in the doorway. Let me come in and wait for them. No one's home, he shouted, shoving the door hard against my foot. God, you're so annoying. Just leave. Confused and hurt, I backed away. I tried calling Grandma, but the call went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like her at all. She always kept her phone on for me. Always. Something was very wrong, and I was going to find out what. Since I couldn't reach Grandma, I had nowhere else to go but my parents' house. Maybe they had answers. When I walked into the kitchen, both Mom and Dad looked up, surprised. Dad didn't even try to hide his annoyance. What are you doing home? He asked, his voice cold. I came to see Grandpa and Grandma, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But they're not home. Lucas wouldn't let me in. Mom quickly cut in, glancing at Dad. Her tone was light, but I could hear something underneath it. Oh, honey, we were going to tell you. Your grandparents are in a nursing home. The world seemed to tilt under my feet. What? I stammered. It was a quick decision, Dad said smoothly. They needed special care. It's better this way. Which nursing home? I demanded, my voice rising. I want to visit them. They're under quarantine right now, Mom said too quickly. No visitors allowed. Maybe next time. I wanted to push harder, to demand an explanation, but something about their calm, practiced responses made me feel like I was hitting a wall. Grandma's voice brought me back to the present as she began reading Grandpa's letter. To my family, she read, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. If you're hearing this, then I've passed on. I've lived a long life, made mistakes, and learned from them. My biggest regret is not seeing what was happening in our family sooner. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Betty and Jacob, Grandma continued reading. I've watched how you've treated Ella all these years. I've seen how you've favored Lucas, how you've dismissed Ella's achievements, how you've made her feel like she doesn't belong. Mom's face turned red. This is ridiculous, she muttered, but Grandma silenced her with a look. I know what you did with the money I gave you for both children's education. I know Lucas received everything while Ella had to earn scholarships. I know about the calls you intercepted, the letters you hid. My heart pounded as the truth unfolded. All those times I thought Grandpa and Grandma had forgotten my birthdays, all those invitations that never reached me. It had been my parents all along. And Lucas, Grandma read on, I'm disappointed in you. You had every advantage, every opportunity, yet you chose to be part of this deception. You stood by while your sister was pushed aside. Lucas wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. His hands were clenched into fists on his lap. Ella, my brilliant girl, Grandma's voice softened as she read the next part. I've always been proud of you. Your mind, your heart, your determination, they're extraordinary. I built that laboratory for you because I believe in what you can achieve. The world needs minds like yours. Tears streamed down my face. Even after death, Grandpa was still supporting me, still believing in me. As for the division of my estate, Grandma continued, I've made my decisions carefully. Lucas and Ella will each receive equal shares of my financial assets. However, the laboratory goes solely to Ella. It's not just a building. It's a chance for her to pursue her dreams without limitations. Mr. Patrick cleared his throat. There's more, he said, pulling out another document. Mr. Smith made some changes to his will just 2 weeks before his passing. My mother's head snapped up. What changes? Mr. Smith discovered that the $10 million he had previously given to be divided equally between his grandchildren for their education and future was, in fact, only given to Lucas. Dad stood up abruptly. That money was a gift to us, to use as we saw fit for our children. It was specifically designated for both children's education and future, Mr. Patrick corrected firmly. And Mr. Smith's investigation confirmed that Ella received none of it. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. $10 million. And I had been taking out student loans, working part-time jobs, scraping by on scholarships. Therefore, Mr. Patrick continued, Mr. Smith adjusted his will to provide an additional $10 million specifically to Ella, to be held in trust and managed by Mrs. Smith, his wife, not his daughter-in-law. Lucas jumped to his feet. That's not fair. She already gets the lab. Sit down, Grandma said, her voice like steel. There's more. Mr. Patrick nodded and continued. Furthermore, Mr. Smith left video evidence and documentation of the systematic exclusion of Ella from family communications. This includes altered phone numbers, hidden letters, and deliberate misinformation about his health condition and funeral arrangements. Mom's face had gone completely white. Dad was gripping the arm of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. I have one more thing to add, Grandma said, pulling out her phone. I recorded our conversation at the door, Ella. I wanted proof of what they've done. She pressed play, and my tearful voice filled the room. They told me the funeral was at 1:00 p.m. today. When I got to the church, it was already over. Lucas jumped up again. This is all lies. She's making this up because she's jealous of me. She's always been jealous. Lucas, stop, Dad said sharply, finally seeing the situation for what it was. Indefensible. No, Lucas shouted, turning to me with fury in his eyes. You think you're so special with your big brain and your scholarships. You know what? Mom and Dad gave me that money because I deserved it. I'm their real child. You're just the freak they got stuck with. The room went silent. Even Lucas seemed shocked by what he'd just said. I think, Grandma said quietly, it's time for you all to leave. As they stood to go, I found my voice at last. Why? I asked, looking directly at my parents. Why did you do this to me? What did I ever do to make you hate me so much? Mom couldn't meet my eyes. Dad just shook his head, as if the question wasn't even worth answering. It was Lucas who turned back, his face twisted with resentment. Because you made them feel small, he spat. Every award, every achievement. It was like you were showing them how ordinary they were, how ordinary I was. The laboratory stood at the end of Pine Street, a modern 2-story building with large windows and a sleek design that somehow still blended with the surrounding neighborhood. As I approached the entrance, my heart pounded in my chest. This was Grandpa's final gift to me, a place where I could truly belong. Mr. Patrick handed me the keys with a small smile. Your grandfather was very specific about the design. He wanted it to be exactly what you needed. I took a deep breath and unlocked the door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew Grandpa had thought of everything. The main floor was divided into several specialized research areas, each equipped with state-of-the-art technology. There was a chemistry lab, a physics section, a biological research area, and even a small engineering workshop. "This is incredible," I whispered, running my fingers along the smooth countertops. "There's more," Mr. Patrick said, leading me to a staircase, the second floor. Upstairs, I found a comfortable living space, a bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and a cozy living room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves already filled with scientific journals and reference books. Large windows overlooked a small garden in the back. "He wanted you to have a home here too," Mr. Patrick explained. "Somewhere you could live and work without interruption." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the extent of Grandpa's thoughtfulness. He hadn't just given me a laboratory. He'd given me independence, freedom, and a fresh start. That night, I sat on the floor of my new home, surrounded by boxes of my belongings that Grandma had helped me retrieve from my parents' house. The confrontation had been brief and cold. Mom had watched silently as I packed my things, while Dad had stayed in his study, refusing to come out. Lucas was nowhere to be seen. "You don't have to do this," Mom had said as I was leaving, but her words sounded hollow, a formality rather than a genuine plea. "I think I do," I'd replied. There was nothing left for me there. Now, as I unpacked my books and clothes in my new space, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. I had lost my family, or rather, I had finally accepted that I'd never really had the family I thought I did, but I had gained something too: clarity and the freedom to build a life that was truly mine. The first few weeks were a blur of activity. I spent my days exploring every inch of the laboratory, familiarizing myself with the equipment, and planning my research. Grandpa had even arranged for all the necessary permits and certifications, allowing me to begin work immediately. One morning, as I was setting up an experiment, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Natalie and Owen standing there, grinning widely. "Surprise!" Natalie exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. "We couldn't wait to see this amazing lab you've been telling us about. Plus, we figured you might need some help setting things up," Owen added, holding up a bag of tools. I felt a lump in my throat as I invited them in. These were my real family, the people who supported me, believed in me, and wanted to see me succeed. Over the next few months, the laboratory became a hub of activity. Natalie, Owen, and I worked on various projects, sometimes collaborating, sometimes pursuing our own research interests. We applied for grants, submitted papers to scientific journals, and slowly began to make a name for ourselves in the scientific community. Grandma visited often, bringing homemade meals and staying to hear about our latest discoveries. She seemed to flourish in this environment, asking questions and offering insights that sometimes surprised me with their perceptiveness. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she told me one evening as we sat in the garden, watching the sunset. "Not just of what you're doing, but of who you are." I squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. As for my parents and Lucas, I heard little from them. Occasionally, I would receive a stiff, formal email from Mom asking how I was doing, but I could feel the distance in every word. Lucas had apparently moved to another city for a job opportunity. At least, that's what Grandma told me. I didn't ask for details. 6 months after moving into the laboratory, I made a breakthrough in my research on sustainable building materials. It wasn't world-changing, but it was significant enough to attract attention from several major engineering firms. One of them offered to fund further research and potentially develop the material for commercial use. The day I signed the contract, I stood in the middle of my laboratory, looking around at what I had built. Not just the research, but the life I had created for myself. For the first time, I felt completely at peace with who I was. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Lucas. It was brief and somewhat awkward, but it contained something I never thought I'd see: an apology. "I'm sorry for what I said at the will reading," he wrote, "and for everything before that. I was jealous and insecure, and I let Mom and Dad's favoritism turn me into someone I'm not proud of. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I regret my part in all of it." I sat for a long time staring at those words, unsure how to feel or how to respond. It wasn't enough to erase years of hurt, but it was something, a small acknowledgement of the truth. Finally, I wrote back, "Thank you for your apology. I hope you're finding your own path now." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a door left slightly open. Whether anything would come of it, only time would tell. As I closed my laptop and looked out at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky, I felt a sense of possibility that I hadn't experienced before. The past couldn't be changed, but the future, that was mine to shape, in this laboratory that represented not just a physical space but a new beginning.